Friday at 5. This is the 11th episode. So for 11 consecutive Fridays, we have been meeting on the 5th day of the week at 5 o'clock to have a great discussion on aspects of education that affect all of us. 2 days back, the cabinet has cleared a project worth 6,000 crores to implement national education policy in 6 states of India. Now, this is a project that is partially funded by the World Bank, and it's going to roll out several initiatives which were part of the national education policy, and one of them being Parak, a new initiative that would be taken up by the government. Now, the pace at which the government is moving towards implementation of the national education policy is a clear indication to all of us that maybe this time the policy is not going to remain on paper, and we would see several aspects of it touching our lives in different ways. The chapter of the NEP, and this is what is different that we do differently on Friday at 5. So every week we pick up a specific aspect of the policy and we discuss it and understand it. We usually have the best domain experts for that particular chapter with us. And then we invite questions from you. And the experts are here to answer those questions. The chapter that we are taking up today on Friday at 5, this episode, is chapter 8. Chapter 8 talks about standard setting and accreditation of school education. Although this is probably the smallest chapter within the school education, part 1, but the effects of this chapter are going to be pretty big. It's for the first time that the government is talking about seriously instituting standard setting accreditation among all schools, both public and private. And to understand the impact of this particular chapter on our schools, on our teachers, on our students, we have with us one of the best experts in the country on this topic, Mr. G. Balasubramanian. He has been the director of academics with CBSE, and he has spent his entire life in policy making, and he has traveled the entire length and width of India and dealing with schools of all kinds, small, large, institutional, and he is going to be sharing his views with us on different articles of the policy. We also have with us Sangeeta Krishnan, who is an active inspector of schools with KHDA. Now, those of you who might not be aware, KHDA is the government of UAE's body that looks after school education, that looks after quality of education in schools in Dubai, in UAE. And I think she has been wonderfully working with them for several years now. And she is going to throw a light on how things happen in that domain outside India. So I welcome both of you, sir. And without wasting too much time, because it's your knowledge that both of you, we are craving for your inputs. So let me just quickly begin by looking at the first article of the policy. Now, this article really talks about enforcement of complete transparency and full public disclosure of all finances, procedures, and educational outcomes for both public and private schools. So the policy clearly says that the asymmetry between managing public and private schools needs to end. They should be all managed with one yardstick. So Bala sir, my first question is to you. uh, how do you feel that enforcement of this transparency will impact the private school system in our country, the landscape of private schools in the country? How do you see that impacting, sir?
To start with, as one who had the privilege of authoring the first affiliation bylaws of the board in 1984, and also being with NABET for setting standards for the quality of schools under the quality division. I must only say in a pessimistic note, I'm sorry for that, that if wishes were horses, one could easily ride on that, right? The reason being, as you rightly pointed out, we are in a country which has not single asymmetry, but we have asymmetry of different kinds, right? So when you talk of setting a standard, these standards are yardsticks are good enough for a law and have to be implemented in spirit and not in letter, right? The reason being the geographical, the economical, the social, the cultural variance this country has is something which is very absolutely amazing. Therefore, while I certainly believe that you need to have standards, what we call the minimal standards, but beyond which we need to accept the reality of the ground situation, right? For example, what a piece of land costs in Delhi, what a piece of land costs in Mumbai, and then how do you organize a school? Things have changed over the years, number one. Therefore, I believe that for governance purposes, for ensuring that there is a basic norm, we really need a kind of quality prescription. In specific, when you come to a private school situation, we have a large number of private schools in this country, the small, the medium, and the big, and the international, right? And people could name a number of things. I would just like to say that a couple of years back, when I was taking my morning walk, I saw on an electric post the name of a school, an international school in my area. I said, look, I can't have an international school in my area because it's a highly populated area. As I tracked down, I went to three-storied apartment, and I found that the school, what do you call the play school, was in the apartment, but was called an international school, right? Now the question, what I'm trying to say is that we have given a lot of freedom for operation for private schools, which is very much essential. I think, I believe in freedom to learn and freedom to operate, but at the same time, unless otherwise, even the operators of the private level, if they do not subscribe to basics of excellence, do not subscribe to basics of ethics, you will find that many of these things will remain on paper. And therefore, there was a famous song in Tamil which says, you cannot remove theft unless otherwise the thief wants to change, right? So we need a psychological, mental set about the quality of education rather than looking at the kinds of schools, because there are schools which are very, very good, which have limited infrastructure, which are schools with 100 acre of land facility, but the deliverance is poor. So that is the premise on which I would like to start the debate today.
So I think what you're saying is, instead of getting into the operations and the finances, it has to be the educational outcomes. So let me bring in Sangeeta for a minute. Sangeeta, what is it? What kind of initiatives does KHDA take? Because in one of the articles in the policy, we clearly mention, when we talk about the State School Standards Authority, SSSA, and this is in Article 8.5 of the policy. They are talking about creating some school standard authority. And they have mentioned that they will draw from the best practices of global organizations that have done that. So, can you just walk us through a little, give us a glimpse of what is the role of KHDA in assuring standards in Dubai schools?
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Good evening, Bala sir. Good evening, Atul. It's great to be back on this ICSL Convo Friday at 5. And as Atul and Bala sir said, that there are two aspects, the quest for excellence, and on the other hand, the commitment to ethics. If these two can come together in the space of our private schools, I'm not going into the public school domain, public when I say the government school domain, at least all the private schools, if we kind of set examples of that, that will have a lot of spiral effect on our government schools. The government has already woken up to improving the standards of education in the private in their government school. So we also as private schools have to wake up to that. Now coming back to the question that Atul has asked me, is what has KHDA done? KHDA basically stands for the Knowledge and Human Development Authority of Dubai. And similarly, EDEC is the Abu Dhabi Education Council, and we have the Ministry of Education in the UAE. So it's the ministry which is at the helm of affairs, just like the Ministry of Education in India. We have the Ministry of Education in the UAE, which is at the helm of affairs. Now, they have set a norm, a standard. And this standard doesn't mean that if they've set it once in way back in in 2008, when they set up the first set of standards, they have been evolving those standards based not only not diluting but actually pushing the milestones and the horizons further. So I would like to show one, the current book, the UAE Inspection Framework. It is a thick book where all standards have been outlined, every aspect has been defined, has been, so you can see rubrics. I would like to show the rubrics also. If you can see, there are grades on which there are standards and grades, and all is defined. So it is all in the public domain. All of you, each one of you can log on to the just Google the School Inspection Framework UAE, and you can download this framework. But I'll take you on the journey. When we began these inspections in 2008, the government of UAE woke up to the fact that they have more than 50 different curriculums operating in their country. It's a small country with with more than 50 curriculum. So you have the Pakistani, the Indian CBSE, the Kerala board, the Tamil Nadu board, you have the ICSE board, you have the IB, the UK board, the American system, the Filipino system, and every French, German, American, you name the country, and they have their own schools there. Now, how do you bring everybody, align them towards what the government had signed for the 21st century sustainability development goals of the UN? So they said this is what we have to align all the schools for. And there was a vast disparity in the economic status of the schools, in the teaching methodology. But they said the children who are passing out of the UAE, who are going through the education in UAE, have to have some basic standards and certain ways of looking at life, certain ways of looking at learning. So, what was the focus? The focus was on developing learning skills. So, this framework is curriculum agnostic. It can fit into the needs of any curriculum. So I can go as an inspector into an Indian school this week, and next week I may be in a Filipino school, but we measure everybody with the same yardstick. And so therefore, it doesn't mean that all schools have to be outstanding. Obviously, depending on the constraints, depending on the financial position of the schools, depending on certain times the leadership qualities, the aspects of governance, schools are rated right from unacceptable or unsatisfactory or very weak, depending on what framework is being, kind of over the years we've changed this terminology, right up to outstanding. There are 6 levels at which schools are graded, and not graded not just overall but in each parameter. So each domain, so learning is one domain, teaching and assessment is another domain, the personal social development of students is assessed, the governance aspect, management and staffing aspect, resourcing aspect, everything is, and then there's an overall rating for the school.
So
Now, this,
I have one question, Sangeeta, from you, and I have one
Mhm.
question which is my question, and one question I have from Adiba Wasim, who is joining us from UAE, and she has posed a question for you. So let me ask you both the questions, and you can see how you want to answer them. So Abida from UAE wants to know what is expected from a school following the CBSE curriculum in UAE. So that's her question. My question is, do you feel that what KHDA is doing in Dubai can be some way implemented in India? Because UAE has, maybe it would have 200, 300, 5,000 schools, okay? Maybe 6,000 schools. We are a country which has 350,000 private schools, only the private schools. So, taking a system, because I know when we had a discussion, that you told me that you used to spend about 3 to 4 days in a school for a proper inspection. So, how do you view this kind of system being implemented in a country like India?
okay. So, Atul, first of all, when you start something, you need to do a pilot. In the UAE, when we started, we did the pilot with just 8 schools for the first year. And we were a team of 8, 10 people. Most of the inspectors in the UAE are from the Ofsted. They have the experience of the Ofsted, the UK inspection system, so they have kind of taken the base from there and developed their own system. Now, if you see, when we started with 8, next year we took it to about 100 schools, and in the third year we restricted it only to Dubai, and we were doing about 200 schools. But today, the entire UAE, say around 5,000 schools are covered. So it's been a long journey there also. But I certainly feel that it can be implemented because for two reasons. One, it doesn't really matter how many schools you inspect, but what is more important is to get the schools ready for it and to get people ready to do that kind of intensive inspection. And when I say inspection, it need not mean a danda raj of an inspection. Now we don't call them inspections anymore. We refer to them as reviews. So these are actually school reviews. So the schools are also on a journey of excellence, and the whole process is defined or is aligned, I would say, in a way that everybody looks for. So we are become partners. We are a third eye, a third party reviewer to the school. The school first does its self evaluation. So they do an internal review of their own processes. And then when we go, we see how robust is their self evaluation, and we help them to evaluate themselves better. So that is the crux of it. The crux is lies in the fact that the inspectors have a very strong code of conduct to follow. I remember, Atul, a couple of times people from Eschand or Madhuban or anybody has approached me, can you help us to recommend our books in the schools? I said, sorry, I do not get in touch with the schools beyond the inspections. I am there only for those 3 to 4 or 5 days, depending on the size of the school. But beyond that, I have no touch. We have a very strong code of conduct, and that is why I've been with them for 12 years. They are very, very vigilant. They're very suspicious also in some ways, you can say. But then it helps us to maintain that level of integrity, that level of transparency. And you will not believe, last time in June when I was doing these reviews for the Sharjah schools, Her Highness Muhadita was on almost on a weekly basis. She was in touch with me. She wanted to know what was going right, what were the best practices,
So,
how could those
yes,
best practices be emulated. So it's
so,
the leadership, let me tell you, it is the leadership which is so strongly involved. And then their national agenda, if you look at the UAE's national agenda, very clearly has education as a top priority in their national agenda. They have set targets for PISA. They have set targets for TIMS. Do we even want to participate in India in TIMS and
So
PISA?
I think the point that you're trying to make is, I think you are also. I mean, if I hear you, you're also indicating that in a vast country like India, maybe if we have to do it, we have to do it through a pilot. But there is a 360-degree involvement of everybody, the top
Absolutely.
to the bottom, and that might take some time. I think that
There
is
is a huge mindset change of the leadership that is required.
correct, correct.
If you know, if the school directorate of education wants to go into a school and do an inspection, they want to sit and eat samosas and they want to come out and give a good report because your samosas were tastier than the other school samosas. Sorry, it's not going to work.
Right. So I think that is the
I'm
reason.
being very, very honest and very frank about this thing, you know.
Yes.
It
So I
has
think
to.
that is why I think Bala sir said that that
The ethics.
it might be a little bit challenging because of the diversity and the kind of mindsets that we have to implement this. But there is one more question that I have.
But Atul, if there has to be a change, it
No,
has
no,
to
hold on.
be.
Yes, I know. So that is fine, but we have to move to the next question also. So we have Deepika Srivastav with us. Deepika, can you quickly ask your question? Can you unmute yourself and ask your question since you have raised your hand? I'll count till three if you do that. 1, 2, 3. Bala sir, my question to you. Is there, in one of the things, 8.4 I was reading, so this is a very interesting thing that the policy is talking about that the school quality assessment and accreditation framework, SQAAF, will be the responsibility of the SCERT. However, the certification of competencies of students at the school leaving stage will be handled by the boards of assessment and examination. So till now, CBSE is actually also responsible for maintaining quality of education in their schools, if I'm not wrong. Do you think that this in any way marginalizes the role of CBSE in the future?
No, as a matter of fact, when you look into the structure of the CBSE from 1984, we have very clearly what do you call marginalized departments. For example, you have an affiliation department, you've got an examination department, you've got an academic department, and there is a to be very honest, there is not much of an interaction in the sense the role of the people are very clearly defined, and therefore that's exactly what's going to happen at this point of time. Even in the state level, when you look at NCRT is looking at the question of curriculum and quality of the curriculum, and you've got a controller of exam in each state, and you've got a director of school education who looks after the administration. All these are already in pipeline, right? The question is that, so what we did is not how you articulate the functions, but what is the quality of the audit, what is the quality of the function which results in what is to be done. That's exactly the whole issue. See, because the whole in this country, the education has been largely politicized right from the beginning for years and years and years. Therefore, I have had experiences where in states where you have got to respect that, because the way that you look at Assam, the way you look at Nagaland, the way you look at Mizoram, and you can't be looking at the way that Delhi and the Mumbai and the other things. Every area has got its own. For example, in Nagaland and Mizoram, if you go, the children have no access to the school, and therefore you have to build and you have got to accommodate certain features. So what I believe is that this is what has been said in the policy is only a reinforcement of what has already been there in some of the boards of education. Probably you are giving it a new name and a shape for the things to come. And I don't think anybody has to press a panic button out of that. It is only a functional, I won't call it disintegration, functional orientation of what is being done. But what appears to be is more significant is that, the policy recommends what is called State Shiksha Ayog and the National Shiksha Ayog, which appears to be super body over the Directorate of School Education, which I think will consist of a socio-political dimension, and which will be responsible for defining the direction of education, the quality of education, how it is going to operate, what will be the features of this is somebody has to wait and see. But as far as the points that you raised, I don't think we should press a panic button. There are most boards of education have got this. Probably now they'll be much more, differentially oriented, but it's unity in diversity in boards of education. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Balaji. Prashant Mule, you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I have already unmuted. And can I ask a question, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
So Bala sir, I remember about 8 to 9 years back, when you were in CBC, you had sent a list of questions which were supposed to be answered by the schools. It was like a reflection by the school on the safety measures which they are taking in different domains of the school. I believe such questions or questionnaire, which is made for different domains, not only for safety, but for other aspects also, that itself will prove to be a very handy tool for every school to consider whether they are raising their quality of education or not. Because I believe when we talk about public or private schools, there is a big gap. And it is very difficult for us to implement, if at all we are talking about Parak, a body which will regulate as far as the accreditation standard is concerned. There will always be a difference in the two types of schools. So if the schools could do their own self-evaluation, as Sangeeta ma'am also has said rightly, and then based on that, they could answer the questions like those which were framed by you. I believe that will serve the purpose, because we already have NABET, which is a very good document, accreditation standard, and also SQA, very, very comprehensive. So that itself will prove the meaning, will serve the purpose actually.
Yes, you are right. Let me tell you one thing. Now, one thing is that there are regulatory authorities not only in education but in all departments of governance. Okay, and these the authorities develop questionnaire, and then you get the feedback. But what is the credibility of the feedback that you have received? Because that is only an information which is received, but then there could be a very huge gap between what is recorded and sent by the school and or any other organization, and and what is the reality between that. And as one in the board, I have seen a number of times a mismatch between these two, and that is why you need a personal intervention verification of these things over there. Of course, now with a lot of technology coming through, you've got visual records coming, and all that could be done over there. But insofar as Parak is concerned, I think the responsibility of Parak has already been given to the NCRT at this point of time, till it manifests as a different organization, just like NTA, which is coming through dealing with the examination. But what I believe is that you see, at the international scenario, we need to have a number of statistics with regard to the literacy, with regard to the quality of education, the foundations of education, infrastructure, whatnot. A number of issues are concerned. At this point of time, there are no national organizations which are doing a very satisfying job of getting these data done. There are many organizations looking at that. So I see Parak as one of those agencies which could look at the kind of the statistical domains of the infrastructure. Apart from that, setting basic quality in terms of questioning skills, because personally left to me, even within the CBSE, when I go to schools, the top five-star schools, I say the quality of the question papers are terrible. And sometimes I find a very small school, the quality of the school is, questions are different. And therefore, you need agencies which would, set certain standards. For example, to me, one of the greatest threats to Indian education is the kind of examinations we do, is the kind of quality of questions that we do, because they promote the rote learning. And I think right from the KG level, we need a differential mindset and to train the people across the country on the skills of questioning. If at all you are to improve the education in this country, you are to improve the quality of education. And I think para could play a role on that.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think one of the questions that came to my mind was that if we look at the policy, this chapter 8 part of it, it assigns a huge accountability to each stakeholder within the education system. So there is a talk about measuring, the performance of every teacher also, and also school leaders, and also that any promotion recognition would happen on the basis of that professional assessment. So my first question is to Sangeeta. Sangeeta, does something like that also exist in KHDA or other schools? Is there a performance evaluation and accountability, and how does that happen there?
See, Atul, over there, the level of accountability for everybody is very high. There is nothing like a permanent job. Let's keep that in mind. There's nothing like a permanent job. So even the school principals, I'm talking, of all schools, but which includes the CBSE and the Indian curriculum schools there, is that the principal comes on a 3-year visa, work permit visa. And what happens if the school is not performing well? Obviously, the management is not keen to have that principal there anymore. After 2 or 3 years, they may not renew his visa. And therefore, the level of accountability and the need to perform and do well is very, very high. The level of teacher training that happens there, not only from the government, but in the school itself, the mentoring that takes place. I've seen transformation of the schools in these last 10 years. I've seen actual transformation because I've been to certain schools in, say, 3 or 4 years back. And now when we go, you see the level of commitment of the teachers, the way the questioning happens within the lessons, the constructivist and the experiential learning that is happening. But, they are blessed in a way because they have only 30 kids to a class, like what the NEP also suggests, that we cannot have very large numbers in the class. That is going to wash out the effect of the good teaching learning pedagogy that we want to come into wish to be in the classrooms. That the large numbers washes it all out. So it's 30 in a class. In the primary, there could be 2 teachers in a class. So the one-to-one support, the one-to-one coaching that happens, the group work that happens, the focus there is on the outcome. But, they look at the quality of input also. It's very, very important that, it's not about the outcome in the form of a test. That is also the national level CBSE results are also taken into account when we grade a school. If the school has got all A1s and A2s, you're not going to say that the school is unsatisfactory. Obviously, they've done something right, but that cannot be an outstanding school if their teaching learning processes are not in place.
Right.
So do you think India is actually a ground, because as you rightly said in the first statement, there's no job that is fixed. But in India's education system, once you become a government teacher, it's almost your right to continue for as long as you want to. And even in some cases,
But things like that are changing in India also. If you look at the ministries, I mean, I'm not talking of the schools, I'm looking at the ministry level. At one point of time, all the posts were taken up by bureaucrats. It could be, Group A services or Group B services. Today, they have youngsters from Ernst & Young and KPMG who have become the think tank in the ministries. So they're also coming in and moving out of the ministries, going back to their corporate jobs again. So, this scenario is already changing, and this change needs to come into our schools also. So it's not only Dubai where jobs are not fixed. In New Zealand also, which I visited about almost 20 years back to study the school system there, a PE teacher could become a principal in a neighboring school because he had some vision, and that was for 3 years. After 3 years, his contract will be renewed only if the school continues to perform better and better.
And
the feedback.
So I think Balasa, where we are, one of the big problems that I'm seeing here is that all these things about accountability and what good is it if I, as a school principal, cannot remove a permanent teacher, right? Although the policy talks about a tenured track and a tenured faculty in a different section, and they're talking about that nobody will be hired as a permanent teacher, they'll have to prove themselves before they become
There
permanent.
would be a TET. There is going to be a TET regularly.
Right.
Every 3 years,
So
you need a TET score.
the point is that this teacher who is being fired because he's not performing, okay, I mean, he'll just go to court and get a stay order, and that's it. It's over.
Right.
And nobody can kick him out of
Right.
anywhere because our judicial system is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean,
See,
that's how it's going to work. So
Therefore,
at the end of the day, will this bring in any change unless it is imbibed by a school voluntarily on its own? Will it make any difference?
well, I think that's exactly where the governance of schools at the local level matters. See, even in government schools, I know I have been interacting with government schools of different states, Tamil Nadu or any other state, Kendriya Vidyalayas, Navodaya Vidyalayas. I largely believe that even in government schools, there are many schools which do extremely well. It's because of the leadership that is there, As she pointed out, the kind of the principal and how he gets the job done. He plays a role model and gets things done. And I think that is a very, very important thing. Technically speaking, hire and fire methods will not much work given the laws of the land here in India. But what seems to be important is that today, with these new policies coming, with the technologies coming through, you won't need a management to reject a teacher, but the children and the parents are good enough to reject the teacher. I just wanted to share a very interesting example to you. Yesterday morning, when I was reading one of the newspapers, I found one teacher of a school who has had 21 years of experience was arrested because he was not qualified for the post. He was only 10th class, but he had produced a certificate of a BA BEd, and he has worked for 21 years in the government, right? And then now they have found out that he is not good. So how do you say for that? You have got all kinds of fake degrees today. You got all, beard. You can just walk in and get it for a payment. And everybody knows about it in most of that. So the question is the whole system, right? Now is coming to imagine a case where all the students, because of the COVID, everybody who appears in the exam is promoted in engineering college. What will happen to the country? The whole question is we need to have credibility. We need to have authenticity, right? When I go to a school for inspection and tell the management and the principal that this is wrong, right? Not because I want to criticize them, but I say that this is good. This has to be different for your school, right? So, but then they won't take it. They immediately will say, yeah, me, I saw, I was I, and then they will go to somebody and get it things done. So you have all kinds of issues. I wouldn't believe I have not gone for any inspection of a school after 2006, right? 15 years. For various reasons, I don't go. But the question, what I'm trying to say is that uh, assessment of a school. The first lesson I learned about inspection was from my former chairman, Dr. Father T.V. Kunakal. He said Rome was not built in a day. Therefore, look at the vision of the management, look at the commitment of management, and see that how it progresses over there. And therefore, we need to give that kind of a leverage for the schools to grow. But then they should be worthy of that. As Ms. Christian pointed out, 2 years, 3 years from now, we need to see how they have grown, right? And that's the crux of the problem.
Right. So let me invite, thank you, sir. Rakhi, you have a question. Rakhi Ghosh.
Yes, actually, it's renamed maybe for some. I'm Mrs. Shumona Ghosh. So,
Okay.
as ma'am was saying just now, a few minutes ago, about the school system being revised and 30 children per class, government is also looking into it. But it is next to impossible for the government sector to have that system in place. And I can tell you, I'm from West Bengal, and I teach in a school where there are young teachers who are in their late 20s. And I was shocked the other day. They said, that SSC has not been conducted for the last 7-8 years. So where is the teacher recruitment body which is supposed to recruit teachers every year? So obviously the older teachers are given, after post retirement, they're given extension so that they can save on the cost. And coming back to Bala sir, he was saying about engineering colleges where online education is taking assessment is taking place. My daughter studies in a tier one engineering college. I'm not naming it. So when most of the time I see him, now that there is COVID and they're at home, even when the teacher is giving lecture, it's on mute. And what she does, and most others, I'm sure, they would listen to that same topic of another professor, maybe in Iran, maybe somewhere else. And
Sure.
maybe an IIT, from a different IIT. And I said, and I asked them, why, what is the matter? I mean, your teachers are good enough, they're qualified enough. He said, no, I mean, suppose you were in so and so college, would you have listened to him? So technology has bridged a lot of gap. What she
Absolutely.
said is, I'm listening to it on a 2x mode. Probably if I had sat in his class, I would not have gone through it in such a slow manner. I would have, I'm just going through it fast so that I can, do it quickly. So these are the different aspects. So if ma'am and sir can, so why are we paying? These colleges have, we are paying where my daughter is, where it's completely free because the government is taking care of it. So they get a handsome salary, and the students are not interested in their classes.
Okay. So I think, so your question is, why are we paying for inferior quality education? Is that what your question is? Pretty much, or a non-standard thing, a non-standard education.
Atul, I would like to interact for one. You see, the other day when we were talking about the gross enrollment ratio and gross engagement ratio, right? I
Yes.
think the engagement of the children is very, very, very important at this point of time. That depends on the quality of transaction and the competency profile of the teacher. The fact that this what she described is not only where her daughter is studying, but this has happened in IITs, this has happened in BITS Pilani, where even in foreign universities it does happen when they find that there is a person who can deliver better. The children try to log in online and get information from them. That is going to redefine the way the schools have. I have always been talking about the new education policy that the concept of schooling is going to change. It's not really going to be the infrastructure, the ground, the number of rooms, but it's going to be the deliverables. Today, when you talk about Harvard School of Business, when you talk of Wharton School, when you talk of London School of Economics, they stand for an ideal, a philosophy, or a concept. I think that's a way that schools are going to manifest. Unfortunately, in India, the whole problem is that we have got a problem of numbers. I can tell you so many private schools where in one class there are 90 students, right? Though the schools are being, run by what do you call people who have got a high degree of social engagement. Now, so slowly and steadily, private education is moving towards profiteering. Therefore, they are margin. I'm not blaming everybody. I know very good schools, private schools, who are doing very well with 50 students. But the whole question is, the self accountability of an institution, the ability of an institution to brand themselves as a quality institution, ethical institution, is very, very important. You may have, just like traffic laws, you got 100 laws over there, but if somebody doesn't follow the traffic, what will happen? And that's true of education too.
So you made a very good point, and then that's actually one of the points I wanted to raise from the policy. The government clearly creates a distinction between for-profit schools and not-for-profit schools. Okay. So I think they are not against private initiatives,
Right.
but they are against for-profit private initiatives. Now, what we know, the reality, I mean, all of us know, we are all educators, we understand the school education system, that opening a school is considered to be a very profitable venture by almost everybody. I mean, I would say 85%, on a very conservative note, 85% of 350,000 private schools are run as private businesses. Now, if the government becomes strict on them and really starts auditing them in terms of as a not-for-profit, how do you see the future of the private schools? I mean, because they might not be able to get out of a company audit.
I mean, I would not like to agree 85% of the schools because that will be too large a number to say, because in the last the 40 years I've been working with a lot of private schools and all that. Therefore, I would say put it largely 50%, right? Not more than that. See, anybody, whether it's a private school or government school, whatever it is, government schools are supported by funding, whereas the private schools are not. Many of education boards in this country are private funded. In the sense, they are self-generating. They are not getting funded by the government. So they need to generate the money, and therefore the schools will have to generate the money. There is absolutely no problem in that. But then, what is the percentage of that is being recycled into? What is the, see, for example, you have enough money to pay to the teachers, but you don't pay the teachers well, and then you circulate that money for something else. There are cases which have come to my notice when I said, people say, oh, we are putting it in infrastructure at this point of time, right? The whole question is, you don't pay the teachers adequately and put it in infrastructure. That's not fair. The question is, somewhere you have to go to compromise. So the whole thing is, I mean, an edge of profit of about 15% or 20% over and I mean, above the income and expenditure is not a crime. Okay, but then to have 80% of the profit is a crime, right? So now the question is, I don't see any threat to private institutions in this country because, you know, given the fact that we might need another 500,000 schools in the next 10 to 15 years, the government may not have the wherewithal to put up across with that. So what is important is to regulate and ensure there is better accountability in the private institution. At the same time, let me also say it's very important that the accountability of the private schools also sorry, public government schools also have got to be done, because you know, I always look at a school is a school, whether it's run by a private or the government schools over there. In government schools, people are paid an excellent, I mean, at least a government salary, I won't call it an excellent salary at this point of time. So you know, I mean, better accountability has got to be established at this point of time. I don't blame them. For example, you know, somebody known to me was telling last week, COVID, we don't have schools, but I've been asked by principal to go to the slums and find out how many students can be brought to the school, right? And the teacher protested, this is a COVID time, I can't go. How can I expose myself? So all kinds of issues where teachers in government schools are being engaged for. One of the things which the policy has said very clearly, that teachers should not be used for kinds of work which are not relevant to them. So I think the nobility of the teaching profession, I'm using the term very consciously, though many people disagree that there is nobility in the profession still far. But you know, the fact is, still teaching is one of the best things. Still schooling is a very good thing. Yesterday, when Kalam's birthday, I was just making a mention that after his retirement, Kalam, when somebody asked a question that how would you like to be known for, he said, I would be the happiest person if somebody could recognize me as a good teacher, right? And therefore, I think that teaching, the schools have got a great role to play. Only thing is, you know, I may quote a very small Hindi poem and then give that, you know, the Mahabharata situation, right? You know, when Arjuna asked Krishna that, can't you stop this war, right? Can't you stop this war? You can do it in no time. Then Krishna tells him, you know, that's by Ramdari Singh Dinakar. He says in Kurukshetra, रुग्ण होना चाहता कोई नहीं, रोग लेकिन आ गया तो तिक्त औषधि के सिवा उपचार क्या, तब तक होता वो नहीं मिष्टान्न से. If you fall sick, you need bitter medicines. You can't please it with that. We have come to a time where we need to put rules and regulations to enhance credibility so that the system could shine.
So I think that's the need of why systems are coming in. And one of the things is that NEP also wants to strengthen the public school education system. Now that again, you know, is something really good, that there is a focus in.
So may I just add, if I have your permission, may I add to what Bala sir said?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, when we are comparing of the cost per child of cost of education per child, you know, if you look at the cost per child in the government schools, it's pretty high. It's not low.
Yeah.
And it is much higher than in most private schools.
Yes.
The cost per child in the government schools, where you might have 60 children in a class, is much higher than what it is in most of the private schools. And I've done this study at one point of time, about 10, 12 years back. I did this study when I was at the Bharati Foundation, and we were offering free education. But being a foundation, we were responsible to the board of governors. And Mr. Mittal asked us that what will be the cost per child of education in the Bharati Foundation schools. And we actually found out what was happening in the government and the private schools. And therefore, our budgets were aligned accordingly. And it was, shocking for me to see what is the actual cost per child in the government. If that money, if the government can give to the private sector, I think we can do a wonderful job with most of those children. The government had promised when in Delhi, when they said 25% seats reserved for the EWS category, they said that we will give you that cost per child. So far, the private schools have not received a penny from the government from that.
Well, it's
So
very
I
difficult.
speak on.
It's very, very difficult to receive something from the government until we have a big question. So anybody who wants to ask a question, please go ahead, raise your hands. We have been taking questions from the audiences, and we would welcome all of you to raise your hands. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask a question that if, suppose, hypothetically speaking, the quality of public schools actually improves, let's assume for a minute that it improves. What kind of impact, or what kind of positive impact also could the private budget schools also get motivated to improve their quality, or will they choose to wrap up their schools and move away and do something else? Balaji, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the question of the school wrapping up doesn't arise because there is space and there is an opportunity for everybody, right? But what is the problem? I know many schools which have been wound up because what has happened in the recent trend is that many venture capitalists are investing on the money in private schools over there. And therefore, they think that this money reproduces itself in every 1 hour. So they say, Subha, what is admission? 12 o'clock, what is admission? 4 o'clock, what is admission? You don't run the school that way. You see, school is a long-term venture. And therefore, when you look at the growth profile of a school, normally in my experience of 50 years in private schooling, dealing with that, I always tell any management that a good school makes a break even in 4 years, right? And if you go to a school in a matter of 6 years with 1,500 students and with 1,000 students in up to class 5, can easily have 1 C of excess of income over the expenditure. I can give you, it's just on the fingertips because you know how to run the school. But the question is, people say, I don't have that money because you have already recycled the money to something else. Okay. So if you really look into the kind of that, managing a school, but if a school started and after 5 years is still struggling with 100 students and 125 students, there's something wrong with the philosophy of the school, right? So one has to look at the ground realities.
That's a very good point. I have Mr. S.L. Jain. Sir, please unmute yourself and you can ask your or share your comments or a question.
Good evening, Atul. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Now, actually, today's talk has been so stimulating and so very satisfying. And my pranam to Bala Sahab and Mrs. Krishnan for painting such a, at times a desperate or a disappointing picture with regard to financing and with regard to the role of the principal and role of the teachers. Now, can ICSL do one thing, that if they can make a profile, a duty list of the principals, a dynamic principal, what he needs to do. And for the teachers also, because teachers also many times think that they only have to teach 4, 5 periods, 3 periods a day, and there is no other job for them to do. For example, mentoring of the weak students, bright students, disabled children, and taking care of their own department, how mathematics can be improved or how computer and technology can be brought in. So when the difficulty is, when we ask them to do certain things, they say, sir, I have taught this thing and that thing. So getting proficient in assessments, in pedagogy, in learning their own subject, updating themselves. And most of the teachers, the fatigue sets in. So I think if ICSL can take up this program of training or making profile of the teachers and that of the principal. I think that would be great under the guidance of Bala Saab and Mrs. Krishnan. That will do a great service to the school education. Thank you.
Sir, what we are doing to answer that question, so what we are doing, we are already currently, in fact, conducting a training program for teachers and school leaders both. And this training program is a 3-week program, which is focusing on 3 aspects, technology, pedagogy, and assessment. But we are yet to really create a list in terms of what are the accountable areas and what are the areas where the training is required, because with the NEP coming, there are a lot of issues that teachers need to be trained on. For example, our next week's Friday at 5 is going to be focusing on integration of art, culture, India's traditions into our pedagogy. I think that is a part which a lot of people talk about, but it never really happens. So with these Friday at 5 sessions, we are going to be picking up some topics so that we can inspire teachers to take the step in the right direction. But maybe we'll take your suggestion and also think of how we can create a comprehensive list out of what needs to be done for teachers as well as school principals and principals. So so I hope that answers the question. Sangeeta, do you want to add something to this?
I think, I mean, there is already, ICSL is doing a lot. We've had leadership training programs also. Mr. Jain was also with us in those programs. Of course, Bala sir and myself were there for the 3 days that we did the leadership program. We are doing the reset. We have the eco. So we are doing a number of programs actually for teachers and school leaders. But, this needs to have a spiral effect, I feel. It needs to kind of, each one who attends this program needs to have a commitment to themselves that they will now go not only implement in their classrooms, but also train or influence. We have to influence others in the school and in the system, and this influence is very important, because we have to, as educators, we need to widen our circle of influence. We have to lessen the circle of control. We have to let go of the control system and widen our circle of influence, and that is the only way change will happen in this country.
Atul,
Yes, sir.
let me show you. This is a book. I don't know whether you are able to see. This is about 450 pages, which is a operating manual of a group of schools. Okay, which comprise of everything right from the management meeting down to how a pune is conducted in the school, curriculum, pedagogy, administration. The school has got a lot of excellence awards over that. But absolutely amazing. I remember 15 years before I had to work with that. The question basically is that this time that an operating manual may vary from school to school, because as I say, even the affiliation conditions vary from state to state, right? Similarly, an operating manual could be standardized and the schools could adopt, the best of it in their situation. I'll give an example to you. From the, long back when I was in the board, there was an affiliation, in the affiliation bylaw, there was a prescription that all schools should have a concrete infrastructure, right? But if you go to places like Kerala, you will find because of the rain and various conditions, they used to have the tiles and, sloping this one. So the inspecting people who used to go there and say, oh, this school is not fit for that, because all other things are fantastic. But geographically, because of the rain and other things, they need. Same thing would happen for Mussoorie, or same thing would happen for Himachal. So you can't have a blind rule. In order that the rules are, you have to take care of safety of the people, and therefore leave it to the schools and others to do. So I think it may be in the best thing with the new education policy coming through. A number of principles are here. We can take the best of that and come with ICSL prescriptive manual of standard operating manual for the school.
I think that's a great idea. That's a wonderful idea. So we'll work on this. It'll be a delight to put that thing together. In the end, I want to thank Balaji, Sangeeta ji, just put my 2 words. I think whatever the government is trying to do to put standards, define quality standards. What I feel is that in education, things work differently. This is not a hospitality sector. This is not engineering. We are not making bridges. We are changing the lives of students. The moment we have every teacher setting standard for themselves, the time we have every school setting standard for themselves, that is how change happens. Somebody coming from outside telling me how to teach mathematics to my classroom, to my students, will, and it has never worked. It has never worked in the best of institutions anywhere in the world. Most of the top institutions of the world are self-regulated. They define their own quality standards. They define excellence, what they want to achieve, and they pursue excellence. And I think that is the role each one of us needs to understand, that whatever the government is trying to do to bridge the gap between public and private school does not matter, as long as every teacher of our school is aiming for excellence, aiming for the best delivery of quality education. So if we have that in mind, we do not worry about chapter 8. We'll be very, very happy and we'll move ahead in a very nice manner. Bala sir, I think you want to say something.
I just want to say a very 1-minute story. There was a guy who was a great sculptor. So a rich man had given him an order to for a statue, and it has to be delivered on a particular day, and it wasn't. So when the person went and said, the architect, the sculptor said, "Sir, I've done everything, but at the back of the statue there is a small thing which I have to correct." And then the owner said, "Well, nobody is going to see that." And the architect said, "But I'm seeing that."
Yeah.
Right? That's what a good teacher should do.
Yes. So that is what a good teacher is. That is what a good school is. And I think the fact that all of us are coming here on Friday at 5 on a regular basis to increase our understanding, we are part of that sample size of some of the best teachers in India. And I think what we need to do is we need to become that role model. We need to inspire other teachers. We need to inspire other schools in our cluster. And we need to make sure that one at a time, we spread the fire of excellence in everybody's belly. And that is exactly what ICSL wants to do with your support. So come back Friday at 5. It's 6 p.m. sharp. So to respect punctuality, we'll have to stop. Come back again next week, Friday at 5, to understand how we can take India's rich heritage, culture, art, and how can we successfully merge it into our pedagogy and into our school culture. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.